There seems to be a bit of controversy surrounding selectable difficulties in video games. On one hand, they can make the game more accessible for many players, and on the other hand, it can distort the game's difficulty overall, as the game has to be balanced for usually 3 different modes: easy, normal, and hard. In my opinion, they're completely fine, as long as you're able to change it partway through a playthrough of a game. So if you don't like the mode you chose, you can change it for a more tailored experience. What I have a real issue with is unlockable difficulties. You know, your expert, challenge, and masochist modes. Most of the time, these modes are not very compelling, especially for longer games. It's like the developers have the audacity to tell you to play their 60-hour cinematic, story-driven, gameplay-focused, fun-for-the-whole-family game again, just with more BS. I had never really seen an unlockable difficulty evolve into something I'd actually start playing, so I wrote them off as something that doesn't really add or subtract from a game overall. That is, until recently, when I played the 1930s-inspired run-and-gun, Cuphead, and it showed me what a truly great unlockable difficulty can do in making a game last longer. Hi, I'm Slightly In-Depth Gaming, and let's get slightly angry at 30s cartoons. First of all, we need to define why I feel unlockable difficulties are unappealing in the first place. For me, unlockable expert modes fail for one reason: a lack of a reason to play them. In other words, repetition. A lot of difficulty modes will employ the trick of just giving enemies more health and making them deal more damage, which is fine by me for your first playthrough. But after you complete a game, I don't think that cuts it anymore. You've probably spent a good chunk of hours repeating a pretty similar gameplay loop, so I'd imagine the last thing you'd want to give players is an experience they've already done countless times in the main game. I would say the worst examples of this come from Pokemon White and Black 2. In Black 2 only, because in White 2 you unlock an easy mode after you beat the game, as if that makes any sense, you unlock Challenge Mode, a mode that sounds pretty nice on paper. It raises the levels of some important trainers, and it gives Elite Four members and gym leaders one additional Pokemon, along with a better moveset. Okay, the game is harder now, but why wasn't I compelled to play this mode after I beat Black 2? The reason? It's the exact same game. Does it make it harder? Sure, but at the same time, it doesn't require me to play any different. The same strategies, team, and overall game plan between modes is the exact same. Just in challenge mode, you might have to grind a few more levels. And if the game doesn't offer a semblance of a new experience, why shouldn't I just move on? Which brings us to 2017's indie hit, Cuphead, and its unlockable expert mode. Is 2020 a little late for making a Cuphead video? Kind of, but I was playing it to remind me of a simpler time. The 1930s, where instead of worrying about a pandemic or global warming, I would only have to worry about being shot for my race or finding food. Cuphead is a game that just gets it right for me. A lot of bullet hells will have their hard modes just shoot more bullets because of more enemies on the screen, and trust me, Cuphead does have its fair share of that in some of its fights. However, Cuphead's expert mode often employs a different strategy to make it more difficult, and that method is the removal of safe options. Here's what I mean. In the first phase of the Wally Warbles boss fight during normal mode, Wally will shoot out these eggs that break apart. Seems pretty tricky, until you realize that all you have to do to avoid these eggs is go directly above or below them. When you make this discovery, you feel pretty great, like you've outsmarted the game, and it makes this first phase pretty easy. Well, turns out you're not smarter than the dudes who coded an entire game by themselves. In the expert mode of this fight, moving above or below the egg is completely walled off. This minor change completely changes the dynamic of this first phase. Now you have to position yourself between the shards, making it way more interactive and difficult. And the positioning of the eggs sets you up to move further up on the screen, perfectly in range to get blasted by Wally's second attack, his finger gun. By removing the previously safe option, it forces you as a player to change your habits in the new mode. You can see examples of this all over the game. Calamaria's blowfish come in faster lines that block off some parts of the screen entirely, as opposed to the freeform dodging of the first fight. Grim Matchstick's rematch makes his first and third phases harder, but the second and most frustrating easier by reversing the direction of the moving clouds. Hilda Bergen expert mode actually creates more safe options, due to you having access to the lobbing bombs, as opposed to the straight shooting standard fire. These bosses have had a few minor tweaks to them, and yet they feel like fresh fights. They made me play smarter, but not more careful, as jacking up enemy damage usually does. And most importantly, they just made me play differently. But while these new fights were good, they weren't the ones that inspired me to make this video. That honor belongs to a boss you can take on almost immediately. Allow me to explain the genius of expert mode, Ribby, and Croaks. Ribby and Croaks, or the frogs as I'll refer to them, are a perfect example of both removing safe options and slightly tweaking a boss to make something fresh. It happens in all three phases of the fight. Phase 1. In the normal version, the frogs attack one at a time, alternating between throwing punches and spitting out fireflies that track the player. The flies are best dealt with by shooting above yourself, while the punches are best dealt with by ducking most of the time and jumping over the final punch. Expert mode says, wait, why don't we just attack at the same time? Boom. Now if you try to be completely safe by ducking the whole time during the punches, the flies will catch up to you, as you can't aim upwards while crouching. Phase 2. The frogs are surrounding you now. In normal mode, Croaks will absolutely destroy his spine, Jesus Christ, while his brother claps with enjoyment. You basically dodge this attack by moving back and forth. You'll almost never get hit, as getting pushed into either frog brother isn't really a threat. Expert mode says, wait, just repeat what you did in phase 1. Now with this move added, getting pushed into Ribby is way more dangerous. Like I said before, the best way to deal with his punches is by ducking. But when you duck, you can't move at all. Along with what feels like a stronger fan, the player has to seriously consider when to duck and when to push against the wind. Phase 3. I don't know how to describe this one. The brothers turn into a slot machine, which has this whole thing about picking which attack goes next, but that's not what we're looking at. You see, in the original fight, before they pick an attack, you have to hit this lever which starts the phase. This is the single safest place of the whole fight. Sure, some slow-moving coins are there, but there's no issue. Expert mode says, whereas before, dodging the slot's main attacks were the challenge, now just getting to the lever is half the fight of this third phase. Do you go close to the machine and have less space to work with, or stay far back and fight your way through the onslaught? And for those of you who are thinking, isn't this just adding more enemies? I think it's a much more intentional and meaningful change to go from essentially 0 enemies to 1 than to go from 6 to 12, if you know what I mean. Compared to its normal variant, this boss is much more frantic, much more difficult, but most importantly, it just felt different. And that's the mark of a truly great expert mode. Phases 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of these bosses' phases were modified just enough. Dodge and attack at the same time, timing when to duck, and fighting your way to the lever. By removing previously safe options that the player had come to rely on, it completely changed the dynamic of the encounter. In the future, more games should definitely learn from Cuphead, as I feel even the game itself isn't there yet. Although we have some amazing rematches, some bosses, particularly in the endgame, just get speed increases. But I still maintain that Cuphead is a fantastic example of an unlockable difficulty. And if more games learn and adapt from it, we as consumers can end up playing our favorite games for that much longer. I hope that Cuphead DLC comes out soon, cause I need this video to be relevant. Hey guys, I've got an SAT coming up, so I've got no idea if I'll be able to put out a video, so as always, I'm asking you to stay patient again. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time. Bye!